Hello everyone, hi. Welcome to the 34th FESIG meeting. Today is the 3rd of May 2017 and the meeting is actually physically is at the Trust in Stockwell, but this is an online meeting, so we're doing individually in our places. We actually, it's about 7:47 p.m. GMT now because we waited about 15 minutes or so for the rest to turn up. It seems like attendance is pretty low today, but it doesn't matter because people can catch up with the 34th FESIG meeting anytime from our recordings on our YouTube channel. Right, so welcome to FESIG everyone. Again, I want to share screen now so I can pull up my PowerPoint presentation. Right, so I'm hitting share screen, and here we are, the PowerPoint presentation. I have launched the FESIG new logo, and here it is, you can see it. That was launched sometime middle of the month, last month. So this is where our meetings would be held physically. If there's a big crowd, a group of people, will adjourn to the Trust, the community center in South London. Well, I suppose everyone has known what FESIG is all about. It's a platform where we bring about free energy, special interests, enthusiasts together to present their work and to share their knowledge and to learn from each other with creative, innovative, varying ideas and theories, experimentations with different beneficial results. Our policy is we are open for all, and we are not taking sides, and it's a neutral, impartial, unprejudiced, unbiased platform where we welcome creativity that pushes science and spirituality to the furthest frontiers in the pursuit of knowledge, seeking breakthroughs to succeed in our objectives of making this world a better place to live in. And this is the meeting agenda, quick presentation, which I've done. New members, that's just Mike here, Mike Upstone, our guest speaker. And a report of FESIG's last meeting. Adrian couldn't turn up because our guest speaker, because he was not well and he was visiting his doctor. So we, James Ring, quick thinking, has managed to get us a new speaker, a surprise speaker to stand in for Adrian, and she is Jessica Marocco, the psychic clairvoyant who has a very wonderful communication system to communicate with the ascended masters and the on the other realms, and she brought forth some interesting information that you could actually log into our YouTube channel and get to listen to the last meeting that we had with her. So today we have our guest speaker, Michael Upstone. I will introduce him in a minute, and then the fourth item of the agenda, we'll be discussing with Mike how FESIG work with the universal trust that he sets up as we have our common goals. And then the rest of the team will join in the conversation, and we adjourn to the next meeting on the 17th of May 2017, where Adrian will come back to speak. Okay, so that's it. So if you want to join us in our database, you can write to me, crystal@truevisionofpeace.com. Right. So now I got to stop sharing. Okay, sorry, I think I have to mute. Right. I want to introduce Mike now before we take him on with the microphone. Oh, I have to share screen again. Share screen. So you can see the FESIG website. So this is the FESIG website, and it has a new logo now. The zone on the top left-hand corner. You read all about FESIG here, and we have I have put Mike's bio here. So Mike is actually the chairman and founder of the Universal Trust. And here you see a link. Just click on that and it will take you to his website. The Universal Trust supports cooperative relationships with partners who share the intent to bring paradigm-changing technologies to the world. Mike is a former FTSE 100 management consultant who went on to chair the first international quality guidelines for digital imaging and is a contributor to the Model of Sustainable Organization, MOSO. MOSO is a holistic model designed to invert common flawed organizational practice to create organizations that work with nature and human nature. The Universal Trust aims to empower others with knowledge and skills to do their work more effectively by connecting them directly with technologies for their own food, water, waste, energy, health, and housing requirements. So this is Mike. Now over to you, Mike. Now that I've introduced you, the microphone is yours, Mike.
Thank you, Crystal. What do you want me just to talk about the trust or my journey, or where's the best place of picking up the thread for you?
If you could just start with your journey and then speak about the trust. Yeah.
Be delighted. Okay, so I think it's been a pretty strange journey, and I think most of us have who are on this path and interested in the kind of things that we exchange about. So I started off strangely enough as a management consultant, which is someone who advises organizations on their organizational effectiveness and efficiency. And in those days, in the 1980s, a lot of it was about cutting costs and saving money and stuff like that. And so I was working for what's known as the FTSE 100, the top 100 financial stock exchange companies in the UK, setting up, managing and troubleshooting major projects for them. And that was a bizarre experience. I ended up with that as a result of meeting someone at a party and going through an odd set of tests in the interview, because I was only 21, 22 at the time when I started this thing. And so I had no experiential knowledge. I had no real theoretical knowledge to bring to the table there. But what I did have was quite a lethal tendency to ask some very, very fundamental questions and to say, well, in an ideal world, what are you aiming to do, and what actually happens in the real world, and making a comparison between them. So I ended up taking on a lot of responsibility at a very young age, but it was a very, very cutthroat kind of world, and very lacking in a lot of ethics at that particular time, a lot of money floating around the city, etc. And I left, and became, first of all, a market analyst. And then I left that and I went traveling around the world, which was one of the best things I've ever done. I think it was such a good experience. It's always, the more different people are, the more you can learn from them. And that was a very, very valuable experience for me. I came back and I joined the army, actually. I trained, I was selected to be a military officer in the Navy and the Army. I chose the Army, and the universe quite quickly battered me out of that. But what I realized was that with my sort of outsider's view, I'd been tagged as someone who was probably going to go high up the command structure. But equally, I wasn't naive enough to realize that, the very thing that they seemed to value in me was my independence of thought. And that was exactly what they were trying to beat out of me at the time. And on that basis, there was a very good chance, a much bigger chance, that I would be out of the organization at an early stage rather than up the ladder. So I ended up breaking my leg and leaving prematurely. And then I was overtaken already by that time by a passion for photography. And the photography had really come to fruition while I was traveling around the world. And I started to get publications in magazines and newspapers, etc. And I set up my own photography business. This was the time of the 90s. And this was directly the time that also digital photography started to make its appearance. And I've always been fascinated by technology and things like that. So I very, very quickly threw myself into digital photography. And I ended up, I suppose, seeing an opportunity in the digital world in terms of training people in digital photography and overcoming a lot of the technical problems associated with it at that time. And there was a lot of disagreement over what was best practiced in digital photography, especially in terms of interfacing with printing and graphic artworks and the internet and remote proofing and all sorts of things like that. So the long and the short of it is that led me into a voluntary exercise to the Chartered Quality Institute, and I ended up chairing the world's first international multi-industry guidelines for digital photography and graphic artwork, which impacted picture libraries and printing and publishing and reprographics and things like that. But while I was there, I met a bunch of guys who were developing something which really captured my imagination, which was MOSO, the model of sustainable organization. And some of these guys had actually worked with Dr. W. Edwards Deming, whose principles revolutionized Japanese manufacturing after the Second World War and led to unusual organizations, in that it might surprise most people to learn that the Fortune 500 companies last less than 15 years on average. That's probably not the surprising part of it. The surprising part is that in 1937, these companies were lasting for 75 years on average. And they'd already been through the First World War, the Wall Street crash, the Great Depression. And they had none of the advantages of modern telecommunications, computers, software, real-time data analysis, etc. So what was going on there became really fascinating to me. And what I found was super long-lasting organizations that behaved and thought and acted as organisms completely differently from your typical organizational norm, especially in the UK and the USA. And these organizations were not just succeeding, but succeeding spectacularly over a very, very long period of time, completely thrashing the averages of the UK and USA. So I ended up as a contributor to MOSO as well. Then I ended up working for a brief time with Humanitad, and after that I ended up setting up the Universal Trust, which is a co-creative entity, which involves the members themselves having certain tools and devices so that the members make the decisions in the organization, and I, as the chair of that organization, serve them. So this is it's an inverted view of leadership, and it ties strangely enough back to some of the things that I was hearing in the army about servant leadership. So it's my role to support and to serve the group of brilliant people, scientists, doctors, engineers, inventors, etc., who comprise the trust and are not just inventors in their own right, but are very, very active networkers with all sorts of organizations like Ubuntu and the New Energy Trust, and a whole Thrive, Breakthrough Energy Movement, a whole host of others as well. So the Trust's intention is to help to remove or rewire the energy blockages that seem to get in the way of these paradigm-changing technologies being linked and connected to the people as closely as possible. So that's our intention, really, and that's our passion and our mission. So we deal with food, water, waste, energy, healthcare, building materials. There's also the crux of what we deal with, which is organizational methodologies and how we can create co-creative organizations which stay in balance with nature and with human nature, but also create innovation at the same time, which is one of the features of nature itself, and how we create fractal-based organizations, and how we actually reverse and completely invert many of the common ways of especially big organizations and governments at the moment. And that's, of course, a big challenge. So that's what the Trust's about. It's not limited to those technology areas. We also have some amazing discussions on time travel, space travel, dimension jumping, pollution remediation, mining, alchemy, all sorts of other stuff, and the people involved are an absolutely incredible group, and I'm very, very privileged to be able to work with them and to help support the group intention. So that really, I think, sort of puts in a nutshell my journey and what we do with the trust, I think.
Thank you, Mike. That's so good to hear. I mean, I'm so glad that you mentioned about how, I mean, you described how you came up to be the founder of the Universal Trust. I can see now how you got to this situation, because you've gone full circle all around, and you realize, as a futurist thinker, I guess, you're forging through a creative breakthrough system where we can be free of the stifling system that is now not allowing us to move forward in the way we want to move forward, to be free.
Absolutely, and I think we're making a lot of it ourselves. Of course, we are as creators and as co-creators. So be careful of what you wish for. I think Confucius said a few thousand years ago, and that this tallies in with intention and how we use our intention to manifest. So one of the big challenges is, how do we create groups that actually really work effectively together, and one of the this whole area is absolutely full of misperceptions about how we can do that. And do you want me to go into that a little bit more, Crystal?
Oh yes, please, if you would. I think
okay, I'd be delighted.
Listeners would like to know that. Yeah.
Okay, so where does it start? How do we make co-creative organizations? The first one is intention. Shouldn't be a surprise to people, but let me start off with an analogy, and I think the best way of describing it is this. Our ancestors have sailed seas and oceans for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years or more, trading successfully in very primitive equipment, in a very changeable and potentially very dangerous environment. How have they done it successfully? Intention. They agreed where they were going to go together, first of all. The second thing was that they had an appropriate structure to carry them there, a ship or a boat. And the third thing is they had a process to allow for the actions of the wind and the waves along the way. When we take that analogy, though, and we apply that directly back to governments and to major organizations, what we find is that the intention itself is changed into something that jumps around. So with a typical organization, this month it's sales, next month it's costs, the next month after that it's customer service, etc. And it's exactly the same with governmental organizations. So there's no stability about the goal. There is no stability about the values, especially of those organizations. And when we look at the structure is, well, we all know it, it's a pyramid. And a pyramid aggregates power at the top, and it also aggregates the people who are most interested in power at the top. And what you end up with as a result of that is that you end up with pyramids within pyramids, and people being very protective about their own little empires. And you end up with internal competition between those elements, and you have an organization that becomes internally competitive. And it wants to stop the talent from coming up from below, and it wants to stop that department from impacting your department, instead of having a coordinated activity whereby the different organs of the organization act like the organs of a body, and they work in concert for a holistic whole. So the pyramidal organization leads to hierarchy, command and control, internal conflict, disregard for the people who look after the customer, and disregard for the customer themselves. So the structure is highly dysfunctional, and it produces its own logical outcomes. When we look at the processes of these organizations are also rigid and calcified. They're very, very resistant to change. As opposed to being very proactive and taking in feedback, they don't want to hear anything that can possibly be deemed to be a criticism from within the organization or from outside. And Deming, this father of quality management, and unfortunately a lot of this does come from this world, but please don't get hung up on the semantics of it. Let's go deeper than this and look at the intention of what this is about. So Deming said the role of an organization is not just to please, but to delight the customer. And he defined one of the most important things as being to drive out fear. How very, very pertinent and long-sighted was that. In fact, Deming was a really, first-class philosopher and a great-hearted guy, and there are many similarities in terms of his work. And Buckminster Fuller, who was also talking about holistic organizations that work as an organism effectively. So we've got our three elements: the intention, the structure, and the process. And what we find is that we've got a complete reversal in principles going on in terms of how we would sail our ship versus these organizations. And if we apply the analogy back to the ship again, if our ship was operating on those principles with the intention constantly changing and the structure being inappropriate for the purpose and dividing the people involved, and the feedback process was rigid and resistant to information, then we'd be crashing into the harbor wall before we even left port. So, as Lao Tzu said thousands of years ago, be still as a mountain and flow like a great river. And what a profound insight that is, because what we see when we apply that as a lens to view these organizational principles is that they're working in reverse. The elements that should be still are moving and flowing, and the elements that should flow are rigid and resistant to information. So those are the first three steps in creating a co-creative organization. So let's go into the structure a little bit more. The structure that we're describing actually is a circle. This is how we genuinely co-create. So the circle itself means that everybody has a voice, everybody is equally valued, and everybody has different opportunities to input at different stages of a process. So that means not everybody is going to necessarily want to talk or participate at one time. People have their own moments of truth and moments of invocation to actually add to the process. So the circle drives this process. And in fact, what we have is a circle within a circle. So let's now take an example of a community. So the intention is here that the whole community is a circle and the whole community participates in decision making. But you may not have everybody in a community who's interested in governance, in terms of strategy, in terms of planning and things like that. And what you would end up with is a small group of people inevitably being attracted into that role in the middle. So you've now got a circle within a circle. Now, if those people were the ones who made all the decisions for the organization, what we're doing is recreating the pyramid. And this is a reversal. It's an inversion of the pyramid. And what that means is that those people make their suggestions and recommendations to the wider circle on the outside. They can then ask their questions or ultimately approve or make their decisions. And that information then flows back into the center again. And what we're creating now is a toroidal flow. And we know that a toroidal flow is the basic energy flow of nature. So we now have a central group which is concerned with planning and strategy, etc., within the overall circle of the community. And what we probably also have then is the interest of people in other items to do with the community in terms of the food, the water, the waste, the energy, the healthcare, the building materials, the social facilities, the educational facilities, etc. And what we're building is the flower of life. And we would have an overlap between those people with those special interests and the special and the central group, if you like. So again, this information flows in and then flows out to the outside again. So this is very, very key It's working with nature, it's working with human nature, it's working with sacred geometry to create flat organizations where the ownership of the organization is recognized as being the people themselves. So this is the kind of structure that we're defining.
Mike, you describe it so beautifully. And I happen to be a visual person, so it's easy for me to visualize what you're describing, like the toroidal form of the structure and the flower of life. I immediately could see with my mind's eye the colorful diagrams and all that. Well, some people are not visuals, so for the sake of the listeners who are not visual, would you be able to pull out some diagrams so they can see it clearly? It will be interesting to see what you got in your.
Sure, let me see what I can do. I'm going to have to. Yeah, let
this
me.
is very important. We are talking about a non-hierarchical structure here, where Mike, being a futurist thinker, he's bringing forth this idea, and that will bring about the the changes that we need. Yeah. So if you would allow the people to see the diagrams, perhaps they would be able to grasp the concept more deeply.
Let me see what I can do. I'm just going to go through and see if I can get hold of my presentations now. So,
while you're doing that, take your time. I just want to explore what you've been talking about earlier. I was going to actually help the listeners understand the concept, right, by saying that I actually wanted to ask you this question to prompt you into talking about the intention and then the structure and the process, but you had launched into that already. So I just want listeners to be able to relate to the concept, the whole concept. Okay, now we have been operating on the old paradigm of the hierarchical organizations governed by the currency of money, right? So here Mike's futurist thinking of his creative idea is to with the intention of the universal trust that he sets up, is to do away with this so that we can then shift and move into a new paradigm shift without the hierarchical structure of the old system, and possibly even to do away with the monetary constraints and the pyramidal hierarchical monetary system. Okay.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. Here we go. I've got some slides up here. I'm not sure if I can now view them as full screen, but let's give it a shot and see how this works.
Thank you. A picture says 1,000 words, Mike.
Okay, so you hearing me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so here's a quote, great quote from Deming, wonderful guy. Collaboration benefits those who choose to collaborate. And this is all about, making an analogy between effective and ineffective organizations, and answering the question, is long-term effectiveness all about money or resources? And what we're identifying is the complete reversals in approach that define truly effective organizations. And in that process, we'll define our co-creative model. Mm-hmm. So this is going to cover various things as to why organization is failing, etc. But we've got those figures, which I've already mentioned, which the average life expectancy of a company in the S&P 500 has dropped from 75 years in 1937 to 15 years, according to John Hagel, and it's worse in Europe. Here's the UN. I give the UN as an example of an epic failure. Just look at the complexity and the hierarchical nature of that particular pyramid. So Deming came out with some more cracking quotes here. The big problems are where people don't realize they have one in the first place. How true is that? And he also said learning is not compulsory, neither is survival. Now we're going to skip through some of this, but here are some interesting examples of companies that do well in the longer term for various reasons. And we have Toyota. And Toyota has over 300,000 employees worldwide and only 4 levels of management. That's interesting because we can compare that to the British civil service, for example, and that's got something like 418,000 employees and I think 12 levels of management. And we need to ask the question, which one is truly effective here? John Lewis is a partnership from the UK. In other words, it's a co-owned department store and supermarket, etc. So the people who sweep the floors and operate the checkouts were offered the possibility of trading out of the company and floating in about the year 2000 and being offered £100,000 each. And they rejected that and maintained their cooperative partner organization. And you know, my suspicion is that they would have been dead in the water if they had sold out at that point. We've got Gore-Tex, who use self-organizing teams in the United States and are consistently a top 10 employer there. And we've got the Mondragon Corporation from Spain as well, who started off making paraffin lamps as a local cooperative in the 1950s and now are a top 10 manufacturer in Spain. So one of the things that they actually do is that they harness the wisdom of the crowd or the collective consciousness. And there was an English statistician who went to a country fair 100 or so years ago, and this was, you know, one of the fathers of statistics actually. And what he saw was a guess the weight of the ox competition, and thought this is a great opportunity for statistics. And what he did was he strolled through these tens upon tens of thousands of people, you know, bigger than the Olympics effectively in those days before television and stuff like that. And he saw a big bunch of farmers and he thought, oh, they'll have a good idea about the weight of the ox. And he saw a big bunch of butchers and he thought they'll have a good idea about the weight of the ox. But what he did was he averaged up everyone's guess. And that's called the collective consciousness or the wisdom of the crowd. And his guess came to within 1 pound or half a kilo of the weight of the ox. And the nearest guesses, obviously including all of those butchers and farmers, were 7 to 10 pounds away at least in each direction. Now, it's important to realize that, you know, actually really leveraging the collective consciousness is not about averaging, but what it shows is that a large group consistently make better decisions than a small group or an individual. And this harnesses diversity, which is mathematical and it's statistical. It harnesses independence. It's decentralized, so it takes into context the local knowledge and the knowledge of experts, etc. And it's structured. And most people think, well, you know, that would lead to something which is very average and very mediocre. But what happens is the reverse. It actually avoids mediocrity by averaging the errors out. So we've mentioned the importance of intention in terms of sharing where we want to go together and having the right structure to get us there and having a flexible process to allow for the actions of the wind and the waves. And we can now see the results of the inversion. So what are the key elements of a systems thinking organization or a holistic organization or a collective consciousness organization? They start off with intention, structure, and purpose, and process, sorry. So one of the things that I encounter from time to time is people who can get stuck on the semantics like systems and structure and things like that. But what happens is, and you know, they may sometimes say, well, there's no structure in nature. Well, this is information from Professor Jeffrey West, which shows just how amazingly structured nature is in all sorts of incredible ways when you start to examine it. So structure is a key feature of nature. And the most important thing is to get a suitable structure for the job that we're actually intending to achieve. So we go into legal structures, and the legal structures can introduce structured separation and protection for entities. So for example, you might have a trust to hold assets, and you might have a cooperative to do operations. But there's something arguably even more fundamental and important, which is the import of human structures to introduce and to guarantee mutuality and co-ownership and involvement and creativity and the collective consciousness. So we're going to skip through some of these circles, but here's the community. Here's our central group, which is the group which is advising on strategy, on planning, on organization, etc. And here is the flow of energy that we're creating, because it's the people in the community as a whole that are making those decisions. And here is an example of a structure that we end up with in this organization. So we have our strategy team in the center, and then we have those people dealing with food, water, waste, energy, building materials, etc., overlapping and coming around the outside. So we're creating the flower of life in this mechanism. So, and we've got two lots of processes that support this. One of the issues of having collective decision making is that if we go down the consensus route, then it can be very slow. And in some situations, slowness inhibits creativity, it drives people out, and it drives them to frustration. And but nevertheless, there is a time to go deep. So what we're suggesting is that you have an energy circle, which is those who've got the ideas and the expertise in the moment, get the opportunity to put it forward. But if that group gets stuck, then we revert to the listening circle. And the listening circle is the one that has to go around at least 3 times, and people can talk for as long as they want. And the intention of that is that people can go into semantics, they can go into their relationship with words and with feelings, etc. And it's a supportive environment for people. So all of this relies on someone to chair those groups as a servant leader. And what that means is that we have some mutually agreed team agreements, and that the role of the chair is to support the intention of the group and the application of the agreements. But the agreements are co-owned and co-shared as well, and that means that anyone can make suggestions to amend or improve them along the way. So some of the principles that we're trying to embed here include the Toltec principles, which are: be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, always do your best, and by all means be skeptical, but learn to listen. So the team agreements are designed for us to take responsibility for ourselves, for our actions, for our emotions, and for dealing with team issues, as the process only works if it and the team intention are supported. So what we're advocating here is team decisions and not consensus, but we can try more than one option. And the difficulty of consensus is that consensus tends to work absolutely brilliantly, but it works only brilliantly in typically very, very conscious organizations, or organizations that are very, very tightly bound together through history, through tradition, such as religious groups and tribes, etc. The risk of going into consensus for a normal group of people, so to speak, is that some people can be carrying a lot of baggage and a lot of ego, and that can cause a blockage for the whole process, which can be very, very damaging to the flow of the team. And these team agreements help to avoid conflict in the first place, but also give us methods of dealing with conflict and how we can apply things like non-violent communication. So we've got now our sub-teams also coming around our other teams, and these could be self-organizing. And these are some of the examples of values that we can embed into our organization, which are trust, openness, transparency, etc. So once we've got our intention, our structure, and our process agreed, the next element is to look at our key vision items, which are what you would call in commercial terms our key performance indicators. And the big question here is, let's take the community as an example again. What does our food look like in an ideal world? What does our water look like in an ideal world? And that gives us something crystallized and clear to aim at. And So we can clarify our vision, for example, in terms of we're abundant in clean energy. Our waste is recycled in a resource closed loop with resource sovereignty for the people. So we yield clean energy, clean water, and pure nanomaterials out of the waste process that we use, etc. So I'm just giving you some little examples here as to what the kind of vision items could be. And once we've got our vision, we can now create a community strategy, because it's telling us where we are versus where we want to get to. So the strategy could be to attend to the food, the water, the waste, the energy, etc., and to consciously create more than we need, to flip around the typical outflows from a community to create multiple inflows, multiple income streams from the food, the water, the waste, the energy, etc. So the next element is then to create a plan, and the plan is simply mapping the steps from where we are today versus where we want to get to in an ideal world against our building materials and our food and our waste, etc. And if we really want to embed the collective consciousness deeply and systematically in the organization, then we would have effectively what you might consider to be a little wheel spinning, which is not just planning and not just doing, but studying what we do. If we build a straw bale house, then we go, hey folks, how do we do it better in future? Can we improve on this? Can we improve our design? Can we make it easier to do? Can we produce a better result? And then we act on that information regularly. So what's happening is we're creating a little conscious wheel within the whole organization, which is constantly spinning, of planning, doing, studying, and acting. And this is an opportunity to formalize in a way, but to also take in external and internal feedback, and to actually flip around and to recognize mistakes as great opportunities for continual improvement. So MOSO, the model of sustainable organization, which I've mentioned, takes this a little bit further. And this is useful because it deals with other things such as statistical process control. Now, that probably is going to bring down the shutters of the mind and maybe tempting us to close our eyes a little bit. But if one of our solutions for growing our food all year round is, for example, aquaponics, what we need to do is to know when that system is stable and how it will fluctuate, because otherwise the tendency for most management in most organizations is to treat a little upturn in sales, for example, as a huge success, and they're popping open the bottles of champagne, and if it turns down, then there's a major crisis. But what we're saying is that everything has cycles and everything fluctuates. The key is to know when a system is stable and what its normal boundaries are, and statistical process control enables us to do this. And this is important when we are getting into things like hydroponics and aquaponics, because if we know when our system's stable, we can leave it be. But if we know we're stepping outside the normal boundaries, then that's telling us that it's time to investigate root causes and decide what's going on there. So MOSO is a potentially useful extra resource to bring to the table if we're getting into things like this. So I will go through the review because I think it's important. Organizational failure is endemic. It's the norm. And these organizations are like they're lemmings jumping off a cliff. And organization is failing not due to lack of resources. Organizations are infinitely better resourced than they ever were in certainly the recent past. Organization is failing due to common inversions, failed thinking, and mindless copying. In particular, it's preoccupation with money and putting money before people. The organizations that put people first tend to, strangely enough, make more money. And systems thinking, this holistic view of organization, which is that everything is connected, is a well-proven solution, although it is little known, unfortunately, by the politicians and by the business people. And we've got numerous examples and exceptions that absolutely prove this to be the case. So if we create our systems thinking organization and we establish those key foundations, especially the first three legs, the intention, the structure and the process, what we're doing is effectively addressing these complete inversions and reversals in the way that most organizations are working. And the model and the strategy that emerges from this as co-creators is one that empowers other people and encourages collaboration. So Buckminster Fuller is, I'm a huge fan of Buckminster Fuller. He said, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And I think that that is a really solid way of viewing organization and helping us to completely reverse some of these strange ways that organizations have been set up at the moment. So that's it in a nutshell, really, and hopefully the extra illustrations have helped to fill in some of the details.
Oh, that's really amazing, Mike, what you've shown and shared with us. You are a true futurist thinker, you are. And I'm truly impressed with the team of scientists and researchers and thinkers that you've got in the Universal Trust that is forming what you have already put into practice, your creative vision of the intention, the structure, and the process. Aren't you? Are you putting that into practice in the Universal Trust?
Oh, absolutely. This is exactly how we operate. And one thing it recognizes is that anyone can have a bad day. Surely I can have a bad day. Anyone else can have a bad day. And what happens then is that the group is able to moderate itself and to moderate that. So there have been times when I have been called to do something that I disagreed with, but that's my role. Is we have the discussion, and if something wants to be implemented by the group, then if I'm so completely against it, well, I can resign. But otherwise, that's my job. My job is to apply what the group decides, and what happens is that it engenders trust. We have to trust each other, and we build better, richer relationships through establishing this trust. So I rely on them, and what's happening is that effectively we're creating like a supercomputer, if you like. We've got so much knowledge and so much information that can come into any situation that surely, let's put it this way: most organizations and most management are operating their businesses on the figures, and that means they're operating on historical data. And if we were to drive a car that way, it means that we'd be driving the car by looking in the rearview mirror. With this kind of knowledge and the ability to harness the collective consciousness, it's like having a radar, and people can spot things coming up. Well, if we do that, then this will happen. But if we do this, then that might happen instead. And now we've got a hypothesis, and we can test it out, and we can then see what the results are. So this is the power of being able to leverage the collective consciousness. And what it does is it unlocks the experiential knowledge, but something deeper than that. It unlocks the innate knowledge. It unlocks the intuition and the patterns and pictures thinking and the imagination of the people involved as well. And that is, in many ways, I think, much more valid. I think Einstein had something to say about imagination being the most powerful thing that we have. And I think that's, there's a fair bit of truth in that. Yeah.
Well, generally, humanity has been so, how shall I put it, so structured with their thinking because they have been bombarded with the hypnosis of the suggestion that you just have to be structured with the hierarchy of the organization in order to create things and make things work. And we are so stuck with that old paradigm that it's kind of a little difficult for people to come to terms with transitioning into a new system, into a new, like a paradigm shift, unless they are shown how easy it can be to shift from the old paradigm to the new paradigm by just putting our hearts and soul into it, our intention, and being committed to it for, being committed and steadfastly committed to what we want to do to make this world a different place to live in, a better place to live in. I feel that committees that have come together in initiatives like yours, like ours, like so many others that are with the wonderful intention of making this world a better world to live in, they have to have the they have to break through the the prison walls of the old structure, and they have to
and a lot of those walls are here between our ears,
they
basically.
have to think outside the box.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're being taught as well through this very, very artificial system not to trust each other. And how are we going to create a new paradigm if we create another hierarchy, another patriarchy, in order to do that? I can't see how it can produce. If Einstein again said, if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same results. I think broadly. So this is utterly barking mad, a lot of this stuff. But this isn't stuff that's not being taught anywhere really. It's not being taught in business schools or anywhere, and very often what you find is that this is also why a lot of the communities are stuck. I lived on communities and visited them, and unfortunately a lot of them, you end up with another sort of type of patriarchy coming in, and so many gifts and so much knowledge is not able to be released in that kind of situation.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing, expecting a different result is the definition of insanity.
Bang on. That was what Einstein said, wasn't it? Yes.
Something like that. Yeah.
And so true. So true. So yeah, how are we going to do this? And especially how are we going to do this if we're getting a lot of these fundamental principles not just wrong, but completely in reverse. And we know from spirituality, we know from quantum physics that the first place to put our attention should be our intention. And if we make a nice crystal clear intention that is resonant with nature and resonant with human nature, then I think that's absolutely the first place to start. Then we should be looking at our structures and our processes to support that, and to honor and to value all of the people within the organization.
But we are seeing the shift in a gradual process, and it can't be like so abrupt that it's going to be like difficult for the majority to embrace and accept. So the gradual shift that I can see that is working successfully would be to still have a little form of a loose form of hierarchical structure, in the sense that you still have a leader. You still need to have a leader in order to like an operations officer, like like yourself, you're the chairperson in the Universal Trust, and so therefore you need to have an executive council so that you can have a meeting to then plan and operate the works, the process, and then once the structure and the policies and the rules has been put in place, then only you're able to run the process with the rest of the members of the trust. Am I right?
Well, largely I think, but I think we need to be very, very careful about how we start to define things. So, for example, the way I look at it is this: a bad system absolutely needs a good leader. Otherwise, it's going to be producing bad results. But what I'm talking about is a good system, and a good system develops leadership in depth through the whole organization. Why? Because if you've got that sort of very, very flat organization, and like I was comparing Toyota and the British civil service, then what has to happen is that the management have to devolve responsibility down to the bottom. So let's look at, as a quick example, Ford in the 1970s were the biggest motor manufacturer, and they suddenly found that they were hemorrhaging cash and they were producing millions of cars a year, which were going out of the production line completely flawed. But such was the nature of fear running through the whole organization that not even the main board directors were willing and able to take the brave decision to say, stop, let's put this right, and then continue. Now, when we look at Toyota, though, what happens is that it's not the job of the cleaner, but if the cleaner sees something wrong with the production line, then they're fully entitled to tap the supervisor on the shoulder. And the supervisor, it's not just their job, but it's their responsibility to switch off that line, put it right, communicate with the other supervisors and if necessary, the management, to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And then they continue. Now, in terms of how we change, a lot of what I do is inspired by nature and by human nature, actually, and by the resonance and frequency. And one thing that I do is I do a lot of photography of things like water. And what I've observed with water is that if you look off a bridge, you may see ripples in the water, and that's a representation of frequency. And if you get much closer to that water, then suddenly the ripples can completely disappear, and all you see is the random sort of wave patterns. But if you keep going closer, then you'll see the next level of ripples appearing, and it's the same if you step further away from the water. So what I'm saying is that you have bands of resonance and then bands of dissonance, or noise, if you like, as you move up in frequency from one to the other to the other. And when we look at how a bowl of water freezes overnight, there are two things that can happen. One is that it produces a sort of a random noise pattern, but the other one is that it forms the most beautiful, intricate, crystalline patterns. And when we see those, a bowl of water producing crystals speeded up overnight, what we find is that those little seeds of crystalline growth occur from lots of different places at the same time and join up absolutely perfectly. So I think that this is what we're on. A lot of people are still in fear, confused and angry and upset with the old system. There's a lot of people who are still in denial and still very plugged into the old system, but there are also small groups of people who are coming together who recognize that our job is actually to help to get those people through the fear and the noise and confusion as possible by pointing them to all the positive things that there are around us and to the solutions. And one of the just mega inspiring things that has happened to me through my work and the conversations with the Universal Trust is the awesome conversation that we have every week. But one of the things is that someone will say, well, what about GMOs? And someone else will say, well, have you seen this? And this shows that when all meat materials or almost materials on GMOs, then the normal 7 generations of genetic manipulation can be undone, bang, absolutely instantly and on the spot. And the same goes for high level radiation, and that can be ameliorated by mushrooms and by funguses and by frequencies and things like that. So what I'm saying is that absolutely every problem that we have seen also has a beautiful, simple, elegant solution that works with nature and human nature that some person has brought to us as a gift. So I see the change process as ongoing, and one that's really well underway in some areas. But what we've failed to do so far is get this sort of ultimate joining up. And my feeling is that the ultimate joining up is really happening now, and that this period now, it's like the universe has said, "Whoa, hang on there, you're not ready." And for various reasons things haven't happened. Revaluation dread happened, sorts of other stuff hasn't happened. But it's like the universe is saying, you know what, that can't happen until you are ready, willing, and able in the right resonance and right frequency to handle that. And that means you got to stop trying to be in complete control of everything and start to trust each other and start to see what you're doing as a gift and as an offering, and stop pushing people as well. All we can do is to invite people and to put our gifts on the table, and if they take them and they accept them, then great. And if not, then we've put the wrong gift at the wrong table and at the wrong time. And we need to, you know, most of all, stop getting into judgment and projection about this.
Very well said. Very, very well said. So we could actually embrace that and put things to move in a smoother direction that way.
Yeah, and everyone has something to offer. You know, I came up with this example a time ago. Now, I had an uncle who had Down syndrome, and a more kind, gentle, loving human being you could never hope to meet. And I put some thought into this as to how could, for example, anyone benefit if there was someone like Einstein, containing, you know, with so many gifts and so many abilities. Well, I'm quite convinced that Einstein probably put on different socks most days. He might not have even remembered to change some days. He was probably certainly so engrossed in his work that he probably forgot to make himself a cup of tea or a sandwich from time to time. Well, Kenny was absolutely well capable of doing things like that. He was quite a high functioning Down syndrome, and I could see the situation whereby, for example, if they were living together, Kenny could have said, hey, do you want a cup of tea? Do you want a glass of water? Your socks aren't matching. And, and can I make you a sandwich? And that is a mutually beneficial relationship whereby what is being released from the recipient in that case is their intellectual brain contribution to the universe. So that's an absolutely balanced and reciprocal relationship, because what's coming out of that is the full unleashing of the first person, but it's also a gift to the second person, the person doing the giving. Why? They're being valued. They are finding a place for themselves, and they are doing something of benefit and of service to someone else. Sure. So I think that we need to go quite deep to challenge our perceptions of what is the worth of a brain surgeon and what is the worth of a refuse collection man, for example.
Well, Mike, I still think that functional roles in a skeletal hierarchical structure is still very much needed, even in a voluntary organization, especially so, otherwise there'll be chaos. But there has to be a certain structure, as you said, structure. I mean, that's the intention first, and then there's the structure, and there's this process. So in order to have that structure, a certain amount of hierarchies is still needed, like, a leader, and then we have the division heads. Someone will be in charge of food, the other one will be in waste disposal, and the other one will be in charge of energy, and then there will be the contributors, the creative contributors, the scientists, the researchers, whoever will come in as well, and then you have this flower of life structure where each contribute to the other, and then together you bring in the fruits of the vision of the ideas.
I think leadership, especially the way politicians have dealt with it, is quite a distorted concept, and it's like many other things that we're dealing with. We need to sort of revisit it as to what it means. What it means to me is that other people have trust and confidence in you and your abilities and your judgments, and on that basis want to go along with you, effectively covering the gaps in the things that they don't necessarily know.
I think what made it wrong in the past, in the old paradigm, was really money. Well, it still is. I mean, money is the currency still in the present construct. So if money is being used as a motivational reward, then as an incentive, then of course the structure is deemed obsolete, because it's not going to work as well as a futurist thinker like yourself has put together this creative idea of a new paradigm shift that people ought to shift into. And you were talking to Carrie in your interview last year, about a moneyless system where you don't need money, but the currency is energy that you could exchange. And that is really fascinating. Now, if you want to touch on that very briefly, because we are actually taking up quite a number of the chunk of the meeting now.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you would like to touch on that very briefly, then we will have an idea how then we can shift more smoothly to the new paradigm.
Okay. Well, there's an interim step actually from getting the conscious co-creation tools that I've just described in place, and that is the community plan. And the community plan is to to look at things like straw bale building, just as one example, as being particularly quick and cheap and effective, and to coat it with a geopolymer, which is radiation proof and Wi-Fi proof, and crystallizes and forms a positively energetic building and a breathable building, and a building, as the Chinese have shown in their temples, that can last for 2,500, 3,500 years. The intention is actually to cater to the food all year round in terms of aquaponics. We know that aquaponics providers in the United States are some of the leading ones, and they're talking about 50 to 100 times the production indoors that they can get out on the land immediately next door in some cases. So the ability to raise our food quality and to absolutely guarantee it is important, but it also means that we can combine other technologies such as resonance and frequency technologies, energized water, ultra micronized rock minerals, etc., hydrogenated water, even to stimulate the growth of the fruit and the vegetables, etc., that you're growing. But the intention of this community plan is to consciously build at least 3 times the capacity required in terms of things like your energy and your food, and to add value through having, for example, an eco shop, an eco cafe restaurant. Why? Because a lot of the community concepts that we're seeing, especially the ones that are talking about a moneyless world, are actually quite introverted and quite separated from the rest of the world. And I think we need to be aware of building in more separation. We've got to make conscious links and bridges to as many people as possible, actually, if we're not to create another us and them situation, and to engage with them and to show them what we've got. So this all links through to the technologies, and the overall sort of summary of that is that if you've got surpluses in these areas, then you have a combination of people plus technology, which means economy. And if you have economy, you also have the means to create your own conscious currency. And the conscious currency concept is that if the community comes together and decides to do this, that then it prints its own currency and it denominates it in a form of energy, which is joules, kilojoules, megajoules, etc. And the important thing about joules is that joules is not just about measuring electricity. It's about measuring, for example, the energy in an apple, or the energy in an apple dropped 1 meter to the floor, or the energy in a gallon of petrol or gasoline. And so it's a universal measure of energy. And the community would print its 3 times the gross domestic product, if you like, or the production of the community. And then those notes would go to the people. Now, this is quite important, because what we're doing is we're saying that it's when the people sign on those notes that they're validating the notes. And this is bringing our knowledge of our power and the power of our signature, which is the most valuable thing we've got in commerce. Why? It's because it's it goes on all of our legal documents and things like that. So we're bringing consciousness to banking, and the fact that it is us who validate the currency. So the currency then goes back to a community trust, for example, and they put on a hologram. And the hologram is going to contain healing frequencies that resonate with the human organism, if you like. So some of that money then gets distributed back to the people. Some of it is used to actually acquire the technologies into the community, and the rest is held as a reserve. So the technologies themselves don't just eliminate a lot of the costs of living, but they flip them around consciously into these inflows. And the inflows are going to bring in dollars or pounds or euros. And that is what gives this currency then its conversion mechanism as well, so it can be converted by the trust. But there's something much more important about denominating a currency in joules or in energy. And that is that I truly believe, and all of the people that I work with truly believe, that there are multiple types of free energy technologies out there, and we're pretty well bursting at the seams with these things about to become public. And when the first really effective one hits the consciousness, then there is going to be a realization that, in fact, everything financially and economically is a function of energy. And if everything is a function of energy, and energy is free, then ultimately everything is going to be free. So the key for us then is, how do we deal with this? We've got a very, very different paradigm here, where everything is scarce, everything is in shortage, and a paradigm where everything is abundant and everything is free. So the intention here is that this currency then helps to bridge that gap, and it forms a slipstream between this paradigm and the next paradigm, and it zeroes out at the exact point that everyone effectively has free energy, or the perception is that energy is for free. And on that basis, we have a bridge between this world and that one, instead of a gap or a potential collision point. There's another currency linked to this as well, so that's one currency. The aim is that there's a yin and yang relationship here between two currencies. And the requirements of a currency were noted by a Bank of England governor also years ago as a medium of exchange, a stable measure of value, and a mechanism of saving. And if we look at this, then the flowing and the exchange element is the opposite of a saving element. And so what we're suggesting is that when the community moves into abundance, how does it save? It creates another currency. And this currency is specifically used, perhaps with other communities, to invest in technologies to do with things like pollution remediation, for example, such as using bacteria to take out the threat of arsenic and sulfides from mines. Now, very often this kind of thing can be applied that actually yields a profit as well as removing the liability from the mine and from the land, and effectively restores it to nature. So what we're doing here is we're making a conscious connection between the currency of saving and saving the planet, saving the environment, and restoring the value to that environment as well. So that, in a nutshell, is the conscious currency concept. And so you've got three concepts now. You've got one, which is the organizational foundations for people to be able to work together, avoid a lot of the politics, avoid a lot of the issues arising. But when they do arise, give us processes and mechanisms for actually dealing with that. The second one then is taking the community itself and creating a plan which is focused on producing abundance for everybody, and mitigating against all sorts of natural issues such as hurricanes and floods and natural disasters, and even nuclear situations, because the magnesium oxide geopolymer that we're looking at was used to coat a straw bale building very, very close to Chernobyl in the mid-1980s. And what the Russians found was that the people who lived inside those houses had far, far less radiation exposure than the people who were living many miles away. So this is a radiation-proof material, as well as being an ultra-strong, ultra-durable ultra long lasting material. And then we've got the element of the conscious currency coming in as a third element, if you like, working in conjunction with the other two. So hopefully I haven't sort of gone on too much and bored you all, but that's the relationship between those elements and how they work together to move into us consciously creating our own currency, but also creating a currency which is designed to work with a world which is based on free energy. Because one thing I'm very aware of is leaving gaps and a lack of bridges between our world and other worlds. A lack of bridges between our community and the people who live outside. We really need to be able to engage with them, bring them in, share what we've got with them, share the vision, share the practical tools with them, and help them to make their transition as well, not just by example, but by practical help and a very sort of pragmatic approach in terms of come here and have a look at it and taste it and see for yourself kind of thing.
Well, this is very relevant, Mike. I mean, we're talking about the enslaving currency, which is a monetary currency right now. You're bringing that and shifting it to the currency of consciousness, the currency of love and intention and commitment of divine purpose. That is going to really, really become the free energy and release the technology of the free energy devices and healing devices and all that. I think when we close this gap, we'll be able to release everything to humanity, and then we are free.
Absolutely. And I think what it's going to take is the back to that analogy of the bowl of water freezing. Mm-hmm. It's going to need us, it's not about us possessing this stuff anymore either. It's about us being able to connect together and share things like this and help other people to make it happen. And if we do that, then we're starting to act like a team. We're starting to act in a way that is responsible, that's doing our bit, but it's also passing the ball to the next person for them to do their bit as well. And we have to be able to learn to trust each other to do this, and to also recognize that everyone has different gifts.
Yeah, this is where I was just looking into working together with the Universal Trust, FESIG, working together with the Universal Trust, because this is where we really, the old paradigm is really, not allowing us to go forward in a more like smoother and quicker pace because of the enslaving currency that is money, that is not allowing us to do what we want to do and to bring all these technologies forth to free humanity. So if you could come up with a solution, like you said, the currency of consciousness, and if I heard that you have been putting this together already, and you even had a designer to design the something like the currency from the YouTube interviews that you did with Kerry. You were talking about the designer who did the toroidal 3D animation for the Drive movie for Fox Gamble. Yeah.
Go all about.
Yeah. You had him to help you come up with a design that he puts his consciousness in, and the energy signature in there as well. And that is really fascinating, Mike. If you would like to talk very briefly about that, that would be great.
Well, we had 3 people contributing to this. I'm a photographer, and I still take photographs, especially of the fractals of nature. What I'm fascinated about is taking the patterns of nature and then reflecting them and then mirroring them again. So you've got these amazing patterns appear, and incredible things, faces and animals and all sorts of stuff. Buddhas angels popping out of these pictures. But that was my inputs. But then we also had the mandalas of Mikey Weiberg in the Svenshögen community in Sweden. And so Mikey has her own feminine intention coming in through that sort of element, and it was bound together by Goa Labau, who did all those amazing 3D animations, and as a sacred geometrist who did the illustrations for the Thrive movie. So you know, that's the concept of the notes, you know, which Goa very, very kindly you know, put together for us. But the aim is that we can do this ourselves, and we can do it now, and we can use it as a bridge through open contracts to reach to the technology providers. So if you're a technology provider, you just say, hey, yes, I'll engage with this. Yes, I will accept X% for my products or my services in the currency, and yes, I'd be interested, for example, in you selling or demoing the technology. It may even be applicable that you want to co-manufacture locally or something, and that's it. The whole thing is simplified, but the intention is that this is helping us to bridge and to join together more effectively than we have done in the past, and especially not to get stuck on big swinging bundles of money, or the absence of big swinging bundles of money. We can do this ourselves, because you know, we have all of the things that we need at the moment. We just need to put them together in a different way. So how can you engage with the trust, for example, then especially if people knows of technologies that they want to put to our team, then I have to stick my hand in the air and say, I'm the least qualified person in our group, technically and scientifically and in terms of engineering, to be able to make appraisals. But what I have is the absolute trust in those members of the team who have, you know, backgrounds in nuclear physics or in invention or, you know, resonance technologies or whatever, for them to be able to make that judgment. But our intention is to try and support those technologies, and even to say, hey, you know, you've got one part of the puzzle over here, someone else has a part of the puzzle over here. Why don't you join together? Because what you're going to make is going to be something that is different or more effective, or something like that. So having that information put in front of us is very important. Now, the other thing that we're going to be doing in the future is looking at a crowdfunding exercise for a community. We've got one in mind at the moment, and the intention or the offering is going to include effectively those people who get involved in the crowdfunding going into a draw to win a geopolymer coated eco house, which has its own food, its own water, its own energy, absolutely state-of-the-art healing technologies which induce cellular regeneration in the body, etc. The community will have its own currency, etc. And then, so just being able to reach people, and you know, this is part of our job. Our job is to serve, and it's to try and connect people to the technologies for the good of the people, for the good of the technology providers, and for the good of the planet. So, you know, just by helping us to reach other people, and by suggesting technologies to us, what we want to make sure of is that what we recommend to anyone else is absolutely rock solid. It's a major concern to us that we don't go off on a technology that is not 100% proven, that is not 100% replicable, that is, you know, misleading people and raising their hopes falsely. So this is something that is hugely important to us. If we do our job properly, then what we're delivering to people is going to be absolutely grounded. And what we're especially keen on doing is supporting technologies that are going to be free and open source, so that you
how about something like a Searle effect generator?
Yeah, well, there's a number of potential options. Some of the people in our team were involved with John Searle, and you know, met John Searle and had discussions with John Searle, etc. But as you know, he had problems with his lab being burned down and his documents taken and stuff like that. And there seemed to be,
well, it's kind of like our patent office. You know, they anything that goes into the patent office ends up with DARPA and the CIA and NSA or whoever the hell else they want it to go to, and it never sees the day of light of day is what I meant to say. They've got about 5,000 of them like that on free energy.
Yeah, you're quite right, and it may be that what we end up with is, we'd like to get a range of things, but it could be we've heard of over unity windmills, for example. So the key thing is, can we make things that are very, very cheap, very easy to replicate, absolutely proven, that someone can just plug in and go with it. And that's a key part of our aim. So we know about these thousands of patents. We know about the issues of free energy, and there's a fine balance in terms of responsibility here as to how we deal with things as well in terms of the inventors. But it's our real passion and our real intention is to ideally connect the people to a free open source device that they can use themselves. And to make sure it's absolutely solid and proven, because we've seen so many examples, even in recent years, where things have not quite been what they were anticipated to be and weren't really quite grounded. And it was our belief at that time when those things were happening that this is a little bit damaging to the breakthrough energy movement, and there are so many great people in that movement, so many, it's an absolutely amazing organization, and it's a great pity because it does tend to undermine all of their work, and so many of these people have been working for decades really diligently,
and there's some in more remote places too, like Australia, New Zealand, places like that, and they do the same thing to them there.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And this is one of the things that were raised at the Breakthrough Energy Movement conference, though, a couple of years ago in Boulder. And it was something that speaker after speaker said was, look at even Tesla. People got distracted by the money, they got hung up on the money, and whoever makes a decision to close someone down, or even to threaten people, or to assassinate people, or things like that, is surely starting to take a risk for themselves. Now, what is the logic or rationale of taking that risk if people open source their technology? What seemed to be a sort of key energy point was people trying to hang on to their project, trying to get it out to the people, trying to get the money at the same time, and none of those things seem to be able to be reconciled. So it was a message that was coming clear as a bell from Dr. David Martin, from so many others, to say, look, the way to do this is to make what you do free, open source. By all means, ask for donations. By all means, add a commercial license. And in fact, we, at the trust, we developed a process for this to protect the inventors, which is copyright it. Why? It's basic. It's protection of the idea. It comes even before a patent. Then put your copyright into a trust. Why? That's the means of protecting assets, and ideally take it offshore as well. But a trust is also under equity law, which is higher law. It's higher even than the common law. Then ideally open source it, and by all means ask for donations. And if it comes to commercial things, then you can create a simple commercial license saying, hey, if you're a guy in a shed, then you can donate as 1% for anything that you sell as a result. If you're a sort of mid-range business, you can give us 5 or 6% from what you do. And if you're General Electric, thank you very much, you can engage us for 33%. And so you can also use your commercial license to level out that playing field in terms of encouraging the small and medium operators to get into manufacture for you, and on that basis have a diversified network of manufacturing as well. And it's only if we think about how we can add value for other people that we can add value for other people. And if we do
on that note, we will see what our chief scientist has to say about this, Fraz.
Well, hello. It's been very interesting. I'm sorry I had to come in late. I basically am at work and dealing with customers. Some of the things that our team ran into is in the free energy stuff, is exactly what you're talking about. Is that the concepts start out really, really well. Some of the prototypes look really good, and then the unforeseen consequences, simply because you just didn't know part of the runaway. The problem with some of these energy systems is you can get a few microvolts out of them fairly quick and fairly easy. And then when you start to scale it up, you go from 1 to 2 volts, and you jump to thousands and hundreds of thousands of volts uncontrollably right away. We run into what's called thermal runaway. And the things that our team, in just before it kind of blew apart because we ended up with some conflict, which is a thing I'm going to talk about, ask you a question about in just a second, but I'll get to the energy thing first, is that most of the energy systems are designed backwards, and ours was also. And we basically started from the power source and went to ground, and basically finding the supply and then trying to figure out what to do with it. And what we've decided and what we've worked on since the dissolution of the group was that you start with where it goes and work your way back upstream through the current. And the same thing goes with dams and irrigation systems. Rather than to start with the big dam at the top of the mountain and then try to figure out what happens when the dam breaks downstream, start at the mouth of the river where it goes into the ocean and set up your controls and your holding and your weirs backwards up to, then you have your infrastructure in place so that you don't have the situation in California right now with the Oroville Dam, which is a dam that should have been 700 feet tall, was then increased to 900 feet. And then the safety measures even at the dam were not adequate, as we saw in the failures of the spillway and the emergency spillway. And this puts at risk everything downstream from it, impacting millions of lives directly, and then the entire nation indirectly in the line of the food supply.
What did they finally do? Did they run all the water through?
Basically, just on a side note, temporarily they've got a respite again, but this is the third release of the water over the damaged spillway, which means every time it's released, it cuts deeper into the mountain, which weakens the supports for the dam itself. It can take some right now, but it left to go another 2 years, there will be no underpinnings to support that portion of the dam. They've got a year, 2 years to get it fixed, but they've got multiple failures going on because of mismanagement and inadequate maintenance of the internal structures. So it isn't usually one thing that fails, it's usually a failure of many things that causes your runaway catastrophe. So it's going to take some problem solving from the mouth of the river clear up to the top of the dam. They'll get part of it at the source taken care of in the next 2 years. I'm fully confident that they'll do it. But the lessons is that you have to start at the bottom and work your way to the top again. The question I had was, I'm going to switch topics real quick from there. And you talk about organization. And in our, as Crystal was talking about, most of them is hierarchy, top-down patriarch type systems. And we see a change usually in humanity and in around the world over time in generations. Is a new ideal will come up and they'll go from, let's say, a tribal king to a provincial government to a republic, and then we see it all of a sudden revert back to tribalism or a couple of steps down. And a point that you brought up was that you have resonance and then dissonance, and then you have resonance again and dissonance. But it's that period of dissonance where things aren't working that the system has a tendency to revert back. And that was my question, is how do we keep the system moving forward, knowing that there will be periods of periodicity of dissonance that is just part of the normal cycle? And that's my question.
Okay. I think there's various ways of answering this. If it's within our organization, for example, then we need to make sure that our team agreements are fit for purpose and that they actually achieve what they're meant to do, which is, ideally they should be avoiding problems from arising in the first place, but also they should be giving us a methodology to rely on, which doesn't personalize things, but it tells us how to deal with things. And a lot of this is about sitting down with people in a circle and going into things in a deep way and supporting them while they go through that process. Now, one of the things is you can't force people to do that. And at that point, people can be in such fear that they absolutely, point blank refuse to go through that process. Now, if that's the case, then the group has to look after the group intention first of all and say, look, we love you. The door's open, but until the the team agreements are actually applied, then you have to go. And it's as simple as that, because you've got your team intention has to come first. The other thing I would do is say that in an ideal world you get more your positive benefit comes out in terms of people understanding each other better, what their strengths and weaknesses are, etc. And if let's take a typical sort of chaotic situation. If you can imagine a jam jar where you fill it with mud and add some water and put the lid on and give it a good shake up, then there's a typical situation of chaos. But what comes out of the chaos is everything ends up settling down again. So the main thing is to have our processes in place so we can actually cope with those periods of chaos, and rather than make things up on the spot. So Deming said, if you don't have a process, you don't know what you're doing. And I think that was really profound, because what happens is that if you don't have a process in those situations, then very often things become personalized. And they can still be personalized by people, but the group itself and the team itself has a really good chance of hanging together if it crystallizes and focuses on the team agreements itself. If we're talking about organization and society, in its wider context, then I think that our role is simply to focus on what we're doing and on the positive solutions and to implementing them. Back to what Buckminster Fuller said, our role is not to fight the system. There's plenty of people queuing up to do that. And, we can see the results of what happens when they apply their energy in that way. But in the meantime, what everyone is relying on is a few good people applying themselves diligently and selflessly in terms of trying to produce the solutions for others and connecting them, together in a way that actually works. So my feeling is that, hopefully those different sort of brackets have answered your question effectively.
I like what you said, Mike. And naturally, the law of attraction would bring people of like-mindedness and with their heartfelt intention of their divine purpose, their life's divine purpose together anyway, like your group and this group in FESIG as well. That's how we're drawn to each other. And naturally, we form this successful core team that is going to bring the mission up from one level to the other, from strength to strength. I believe that that is what is happening.
Absolutely, but there's another side to this, which is what happens when the overall field goes into dissonance and we get, these heavy waves and we're bouncing up and down and everything is changing and being rattled around. Well, we have to see that as being the benefit that it is. We're children of the universe. We're subject to the universal laws and forces. And, this is designed to shake things out as well. So, it can't, if we're creating a ship, we have to appreciate that not everything is going to be smooth sailing. It's really pleasurable and it's really easy when it is smooth sailing, but the real test of a ship is to go through the storms and to have strategies in place to deal with them and survive them. And it's really, really important that we think about our processes and our structures beforehand, because if we start to make it up on the spot, then we're really opening things up for a lot of politics and things to be treated personally and stuff, instead of saying this is about the group and it's about the group field and the group intention.
Right. I find that the ego issues and the personality issues, they tend to get really, really, really insignificant once the true intention of the divine purpose in people's hearts has taken center stage. And that all those will just dissolve away, and I think we're just going to be good in what we're going to do and be successful.
agree, but I think that we're also capable of a lot of self-delusion as a species, and this is the beauty of surrendering to this collective consciousness process, if you like, and that is that I know. No, it's like falling into a black hole. It can happen culturally, it can happen personally and individually. We never know when it's going to happen, and this is the beauty of if you can do it, surrendering to the process and to the people who surround you in this trust relationship. So that's something else that sort of pops up from time to time. We never know when we are going to meet that opportunity.
We will know how to draw the line. We will have to know when to draw the line between self-delusion and what we think it's possible to manifest from the vision and the creativity that we've got naturally. Like, for instance, FESIG lately has been exploring what our dear brother James Ring has been working most of his life, dedicating his divine mission in bringing the super soldiers community together. And when they come together, it's pretty amazing because they're remembering what they have been using, this advanced technologies that the ETs has put together for them in the secret space programs. And over to you, James. James, we have been exploring the secret space program technologies, and you have got some amazing disclosure information about these technologies are going to be released, and it's going to be released within a short space of a couple of years. And when it does, it's open source, it's free for all, and that is when we are going to have our huge big breakthrough. James?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. I mean, I could comment about that for sure. I definitely believe we're about to see a dam that's about to break, and all this technology is going to be released, and the whole world's going to be changed upside down. You can almost call it magic, basically. I think on a subconscious level, we all know that we're about to go to this point of the chart where everything just the hockey stick chart, where everything goes like that. That's about where we're about to head to. So I created my own kind of financial vision of what I would like to see in the future, and what I termed is I called it a city of light, but we can call it whatever you want to call it. Essentially, it's a financial system that mirrors our own, except that it puts it back into the hands of the people. And that's where I would like to get Mike's feedback. Do I have time, a few minutes to explain this?
James, you do, because what you're going to say is very important. Go on.
Yeah.
Now.
Okay. So essentially, yeah. Okay. Well, let me explain what this is, and then we can talk about the concerns. Well, basically, as I said, it mirrors our own. What I visualize is we create maybe a city. If we could purchase land in the desert, or even float a city out in the ocean so we can get away with jurisdiction issues, or find a country where they allow this. We could purchase the land, and we can incorporate our own city and set up our own bank. The city will own the bank. And what I visualize now, it could be done different ways, but perhaps one way we could do it is that all the people that live in this particular municipality will be given a $100,000 bond, and we're going to peg it to the dollar because I have no other way of currency to call it right now. And then the bank itself will fractionally lend out 10 times based on that bond, or $1 million. So for everyone in the city, all this money will be generated. And of course, I mean, it is extremely hyper inflationary to do that. But the thing is, this money could be invested, if we could, the bank itself, the city bank, will direct that money to be invested into businesses, startups. Of course, most startups fail, but definitely businesses. We can entice businesses into the city that will be owned instead of getting a loan where you have to pay interest, the bank will take a percentage of the company, no more than 40%, because a lot of people are concerned about the bank running everything and taking everything over. But essentially, we have that right now. It's just it doesn't return back to the people. So I'm just kind of fixing the equation so it would work properly. And I can explain why I say we have that right now if you after I'm done with this, if you want to know. But essentially, what will happen is because the city bank owns these businesses, city level governance will work along with businesses instead of these two organizations, private and public and so on, fighting with each other, trying to hide money, hiring tax accountants, hiring attorneys, that's it. And so on, and trying to get away from regulators and fiduciaries and all this. So we can have them all work together. Now, here's the other thing. Since each person in this municipality is funding the bank, they will be owners of the bank. So the bank is 100% owned by all its citizens through what I visualize, maybe a share, or it could be, I don't know, maybe we could set it up as a trust. I'm not sure how an owner we could do a trust, but essentially the businesses, there's going to be no taxes in this city. So what I visualize, in order to entice businesses to pump money back into the bank, is through dividends. Now, most businesses probably say, well, if we can get free money from the government, why are we going to pay dividend? We just keep it all ourselves, blah, blah, blah. Well, what if, because the bank is by law allowed as an entity to fractionally lend. Now, fractionally lend allows you to leverage, and I just mentioned 10 times leverage. It can be brought down some if we're a little concerned about being over leveraged and bank runs and so on. But if we could just let's just say the average rate of return of this portfolio is 4%, which is reasonable. I mean, it could probably be closer. Right now, government portfolios run at closer to 11%, and they lie and say it's less than that, but it is closer to 11%. But at 4% and then 10 times leverage, that's 40% rate of return ROI on the money that's actually in deposit. So what if we could entice these businesses to set up special bank accounts where they get 20% rate of return for maybe like 2 years or 3 years? So the dividends that these businesses earned could be deposited in another account at this bank, which would give them even greater ROIs than they could possibly make through their business activities, usually, unless you make 20% greater ROI. But that way, the money that's be generated from that account will pay for city governance. So now we can eliminate taxation in the city. So we have free tax. I mean, there's no taxation. There's plenty of money to go around as long as it's not abused, and we don't have nepotism and all sorts of weird things going on. The way it has to be, we have to have honest bankers. Hopefully. I mean, really, you got to have honest people no matter what system you go. Otherwise, it's going to fail. That's corruption can destroy things. But so we have we can, and the money, probably not at first, but later on we can have free health care and all the other issues. And what I also visualize is a portion of the earnings of this bank, city-owned bank, will be returned back to the state or federal level or provincial or wherever you are, regional. So all relevant taxation is taken by the bank. The people don't have to pay any taxes. The businesses don't have to pay any taxes. The businesses that want to make a little extra money in their dividend account, they can. So they're not being extorted out of money or we want to pass laws to get them to cough up money. They would want to do it. I mean, why not? Why? I mean, so that's what I visualize. Now, the problem is, of course, inflationary issues. I mean, if we calculate a 4% GDP, how much money is going to be created on an annual basis? Because the economy is going to be growing. More money can be issued as long as it's not being flooded. Next thing you know, right? So yeah, as long as that's controlled and maintained, and also what can be done to ensure that, because we got it now that the city governance is controlling the businesses, even though they're working together, what can we do to ensure that a small group of people don't get involved in the city governance and start controlling where all the money is flowing, make sure certain businesses get funded and the rest don't, in their own little, they're all getting kickbacks and so on. So I haven't quite figured that part out of the model. So theoretically this would work as long as people were honest, and it definitely would work better than what we have now. And what I would like to explain is what we have now is, if you look at the ownership of the institutional investors on Wall Street, the so-called pension funds and the big money out there, you would find that 80 to 90% of all Fortune 500 companies are owned by the government, state, local, federal, aggregate pension funds. And it's not just pension funds, it's rainy day funds, self-insurance funds, and so on and so on. And there's also all the offshore money that's being held by the Federal Reserve, which is being used like the plunge protection team to pump and dump the stock market, which should be illegal. Anyway, but the point is, I'm trying to say here is the government already owns 80 to 90% of largest companies. And once a company goes public on the stock market, that is code word for government owned. And the people are not told that we live in a communist system. So
isn't it the New York Times that's owned by the CIA?
I wouldn't doubt it.
I think that's right.
You could also say Pfizer and all these pharmaceutical companies that are poisoning people, owned by the government, all this offshoring phenomenon.
Santa is one of the big ones.
Okay. In 1979, a rule was changed. FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Board, changed a rule that allowed for government pension funds to invest offshore. And then that's when they realized they could buy these companies offshore, make more money. And so our own governments, per se, are destroying jobs. And that also goes in the UK and so on and so on, because this system has been incorporated worldwide per FASB and so on. So what's going on is that this money that's being generated in these government ledgers, the CAFRs, is not being returned back to the general budget. They're just holding on to it. And in my opinion, they're probably using it for the secret space program. So what I like to do is flip the situation. Instead of that money could just be used for whatever they want, it needs to go back into the general budget. Governments, businesses, and people need to work together. We need to get rid of this punitary system where we try to punish people, throw them in jail. We have to hire like I said earlier. So yeah, that's what I got.
I didn't know that that's what you're going to go into, James. I said you got something very important to say. That was the disclosure of and the release of the secret space programs technologies to the people, and how real it can be. I thought you're going to embellish on the reality of that being released, but you were talking about this great idea of yours. Well, I suppose, Mike, what do you think? It could be a good transition for the shift to happen. Meanwhile,
kind of a Asgardian concept.
A cashless society, like a non-currency society. I think what James has brought forth could be a good transitional vehicle. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I think James was bang on with one of the most important points that he said, which was that the bank effectively needs to be owned by the people.
Yeah.
And surely that is, going to resolve a lot of the problems.
That will certainly take the controllers hands off the currency that you're talking about, that we're going to transition into.
Absolutely. Now, James, was also talking about the issues of, the governance in terms of how do we stop a group from being, infiltrated.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to share one of my experiences. It's not quite that situation, but it does show the power of these tools. So when I was chairing the International Quality Guidelines for digital photography and graphic artwork, We had a host of different contributors. We had quality management professionals. We had industry trade bodies like the British Printing Industries Federation and the British Association of Picture Library Agencies. And we had photographic bodies, and we had publishers, and we had manufacturers, and it was a real mishmash of people and organizations taking part in that. But I viewed that as being the group was making its decisions, and I was chairing it, and my role effectively, and this is exactly the same with the conscious co-creation tools, is to make sure that everybody gets heard, and to help to keep the focus of the group on the intention and on the manifestation. So one of the things that we don't fly under the energy circle, as it's known, is I don't like it. Because I don't like it undermines the person who's making the proposition that's being put forward. The onus is on me, if I don't like it, to put forward an improvement on that idea, or an alternative idea that I think is better. And that really honors the other person who's putting something forward in any case. But what we found was that the company routinely used to send 3 people to our meetings. And that was, there was clearly at one stage an indication that they wanted to have their product embedded in our international quality guidelines. Now, quite clearly, that was something that the group didn't want and didn't find desirable. But what happened was, when they realized that they couldn't possibly influence me because it was the group that was making the decisions, then they realized that they'd have actually had to send more than 50% of the people to the meeting in order to produce the result that they wanted. And something quite fascinating happened. What happened was that that company did a brilliant thing. It continued to send 3 people towards the neutrality of the guidelines that we were producing, and they put their commercial agenda to one side. Now, that tells me that this is a very good technique, effectively, to avoid infiltration as well. So this is the and it also prevents the person who's doing the leadership role, or the chairing role, or however you want to look, from being put under undue influence, because I don't have any influence. If I'm having a bad day, or if I'm putting forward an idea that doesn't resonate with the group, it just isn't going to fly. So this is one of the important things that we found out from that exercise, effectively, as to how useful it is in terms of preventing infiltration. So what we find is that when something doesn't resonate with people, either they will, because they're co-owners, because they're going to be listened to, because they are equally valued, either they can change their response that they are bringing to the group, or alternatively, if they're unable to do that, then what tends to happen is that they will step out of the energy. But it's our job, the rest of the group, to try not to be judgmental about them if they're not able to, to abide by the team processes at that stage. We've got the processes to deal with people who are having a problem. If you've got a problem with someone else, then you need to take it to them, and if not, then you have like a counsellor, effectively someone with very, very good people skills, who's used to guiding people into their fear zones and trying to navigate them through them. And if not, then we have a listening circle. But ultimately, if that doesn't work, it goes back to a decision circle where, people say, okay, well, you've got to abide by the team agreements, or you have to leave. So I wanted to touch on that point because it seems to be such an important one that that James made. I think a lot of what you were saying, I think, the way I see it, James, is I'm talking at the alternative currency conference in the coming week, which is in Barcelona. I'll be doing it over Skype or whatever. But what I'm seeing is that more and more people are recognizing the import of banking, of currency, of finance, etc., and are coming out with really great positive ideas to deal with it. And the way I see it is there's no one solution that is going to be the solution. if it was, it would be dead easy to knock out that solution. What I see instead is that the system is like we're millions of ants crawling all over an elephant, effectively exploring every crevice and every orifice, and the system is not going to experience. And it's kind of like, if we look at the system, it's like an enormous dam in front of us, to match with one of the other things that someone was saying about the Oroville Dam. Now we can think, that we can't possibly do anything. If we're close up to this dam, which is the existing system, then what we see is it's absolutely covered in hairline cracks at the moment. Job is not to blow up the dam. Our job is to make sure that whatever happens when those cracks start to flow is within our realm of influence, as positive as we can possibly make it. So I love to hear of different ideas and diversities of views, because if it's the intention that's right, then there is something about that is going to work, and is going to impact other people, and is going to inspire other people. So I don't view it that there is any particular one solution. We're all carrying a slightly different little bit of energy about what we do, and the important thing is that A, we're carrying that energy, and B, we're doing something with it. And I think that's everything at the moment for what we're trying to
thank
deal
you,
with.
Mike. Yeah, James certainly has a wonderful creative idea there. I mean, it's so wonderful to know that that could be a solution where people could own the currency instead of the cabal or the controllers.
And the bank.
And the banks,
Well, you did.
I
want to say thank you, Mike. You answered my question. While you were talking, what I came up with ideas is so let's say this bank. The problem is how do we direct the money into the hands of the entrepreneurs? Because you're going to have bankers and they're going to have gatekeepers, and we want to make sure we have the right people and they're not going to misuse the allocation of funding. So what if we could set up a crowdsourcing website where all these projects are put on a website where members of people that live in that city will have the right to vote on that website, and they can vote for these projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're looking at crowdfunding. We need to look at the what's in it for me sort of element, and we know because we've just been looking at this at the present time, and this is what we've agreed as our strategy. So I'll just share what we're planning to do, which is that we're aiming to start off with the eco community and eco house concept, and that means we're dealing with multiple areas and multiple technologies within each area, for the food, for the water, for the waste, for the energy, for the building materials, for the healthcare in particular. And the best thing that's going to come out of that is that we are going to share everything, and we're going to open source everything that comes out of that exercise. So the key unknowns for us at the moment, even for us as a group, are which geopolymer to use from the various ones that are available on the market. How much is it going to cost? Exactly what is the plan? How much labor is it going to take to build a building of so many square feet or so many square? We don't know all of this, so we have to ground it, and we have to make sure that we can put all this information together for people, so that someone can pick it up and go, okay, well, this is what they calculated for the UK, but the straw bales here cost this much, and but now I know how long the labour should take to produce this building of this size. Now I know exactly what the wood frame needs to be specified to, etc. So we're aiming to deliver that on a plate to people and to absolutely everybody. So the first what's in it for me as a donor is then, okay, well, I can actually now go on an email list, so that I'm going to have that information delivered for building materials or food or everything, the things that I'm particularly interested in, coming to my inbox, whether it's videos, plans, costings, etc. Everything's going to be shared. The next one is going to be that if you donate over a certain figure, then you will automatically be given an opportunity to come to a conference for a weekend where the food and the accommodation is going to be free. And the next one is going to be that you go into a draw, whoever you are and whatever you donate, to be the winner of a fully fledged eco house, and the community itself will offer the currency and all the rest of it. So that's what we're looking at to address this, but that's going to be a first step. The aim is that we need to build our credibility for what we're doing. And we have to recognize that, you know, it's us to prove ourselves, especially when so many people have had so many issues of being, you know, let down, frankly, where it comes to free energy technologies and things like that. So we have to recognize that, we have to step up to the plate, and we will build our credibility using this this approach, and then we will aim to fund other communities using exactly the same model. But the intention there is that we build our user base, we build the people who know that what we're dealing with is real, who see the value in what we're dealing with, and then we go for the next stage. And the next stage for us will be to set up a fund which will be for profit in terms of equity funding, but also have a not-for-profit element, because we believe strongly that the two need to go along together if we're going to bridge paradigms. And the not-for-profit other technology, community projects, the media projects and things like that, and will be a way of recycling profits back into other projects. So that's just how it's one that resonates with. But if it gives you some ideas that you feel resonate with you as well, then, you know, that's why I'm telling it is take what you want and what works for you and what resonates with you, and use it. I would suggest, because this is all part of us sharing. But that's how we're planning to approach the crowdfunding sort of concept, and how we're aiming to also fulfill our mission and reach as many people as possible at the same time.
It's very interesting, James. Mike. Yeah, Fraz, you want to jump in real quick, because it's been over 2 hours, and I promise Mike
James,
that I should keep him too long. Yeah, go ahead.
James, you may want to take a look at the city of Bellevue, Washington. They basically started up as a reject of the city of Seattle with their business model, with city model. And the nice thing about the city of Bellevue at this particular time is that they are actively repairing their infrastructure at a known repair cost. And as these systems grow, there's also the maintenance of it. They're the only city in the state of Washington that is even addressing the potential of failure of the internal workings. The rest of them are basically fixing as it happens. They don't even know that a pipe in the ground is going to fail until it fails. City of Bellevue, they find one that has failed. They check back on the data to see when it was built, who was the contractors, what was the materials used, and are there other spaces in the city, other places that have these same materials and same contractors. There's nothing they can do to go back on the old contractors, but they do now know that there's these areas that will need to be worked on. And so they're actively repairing as they're finding it, and they're repairing in advance of the failure. No other city in the state is doing that. And that's my 2 cents.
That's an organization that's using a radar and not a rear view mirror, which is great to hear. It's, you know, isn't it refreshing for us to get examples like this coming forward, because we can, you know, it's tangible. It's showing us that the change is happening, and in a lot of areas there are people who really do want to change. And I've been hearing about leaders of major corporations and stuff like that who are having spiritual awareness experiences, and they want to change. What they don't know is how to manifest the change at the moment. So we're all contributing to this. I'm quite sure of it.
Sure. Mike, thank you so much. I think I have to wrap this up very quickly because my laptop can't take too long a recording on YouTube. So guys, this is so amazing and it's fantastic. Thank you, Mike, for availing yourself to speak in this meeting. And you've brought up so many things that are so good for everyone. But we are learning so much from you and the ideas and the creativity of your team that puts together everything that is going to move us forward in the our mission. All right. So I'm going to share screen now very quickly. I'm not going around the table because we all, each and every one of us, has said our piece. I'm gonna share something very quickly. Share screen. Okay, now this is your website. right, Mike? The
Yes.
Universal Trust, okay? And these are your people, your scientists, and that's you, who's the you're an inventor yourself, and there you are. I mean, the whole team that you got here, it's pretty amazing. And if any of these scientists and researchers and leaders of your team who wants to come and speak in FESIG, they are most welcome with open arms.
Oh, fantastic. A lot of them would love it, and they're carrying such precious information to share with people, and they're absolutely a phenomenal bunch of people, each and every one of them.
With so much we can learn from every one of them there, that you got an amazing lineup of very special people. I'm gonna, okay, for those who have been missing out on this meeting live with the question and answer session with Mike Upstone, you can actually go into our website, the FESIG website. This is the FESIG website, okay, and click on Mike's link there, the Universal Trust, and read more about his work and his people's, his team coming together to bring about the shift of the paradigm, the new paradigm. And here, FESIG has launched its new logo and its new Facebook banner, as well as the YouTube banner. And if you go to our YouTube or Facebook, you see the announcements of our meeting twice a month, the first and third Wednesdays of the month. And if you click on the YouTube channel, FESIG's YouTube channel, they're up here, okay? YouTube, Facebook, you will be able to see all the recordings of the meetings that you might have missed. Like we had the last meeting that recorded with Jessica Marocco, discussing some issues that would be so interesting for you viewers. There you go. And that's it. And the next meeting will be on the 17th of the month with Adrian Espinosa, who's got access to the Skynet database. James, would you like to talk a little bit about what Skynet is about and how is it linked to the ACIO, Peter of the ACIO as well?
Yeah, well, from what I've been told, Skynet is a division or subdivision of the NSA that monitors all the people's psychic communication with each other, in particular the cyborgs, but they're also tied into a lot of electronics, different communication systems within the military. And they have access to databases that the traditional, I guess you could call it the spooks, do not have access to, similar to the ACIO. So we're talking alien databases, cyborgs, Area 51, Off-World, Mars, etc. So yeah, that should be really interesting. So please be sure to join us.
Thank you, James. And here I would like to show also Tom Venculen has contributed a production that he did for FESIG's introduction identity. And here I would like to play that. Well, I have to see how to shake. You can't hear the audio, can you?
No.
Okay, if you can't, I have to do that again. But how do I do that on Zoom? Is it on? How do I do that for you to hear the audio, James? Do you know how to do that? More, okay. Optimize share for full screen video clip. Is that it?
No.
The Free Energy Special Interest Group, where science meets spirituality in the quest for truth and knowledge.
Yes.
To free humanity and transform this planet.
Okay, I'm going to start again. Sorry about that. Okay, right.
Let's get together to co-create a breakthrough for freedom of energy, sustenance, healing, and regeneration of the human vessel. We are now in the midst of fulfilling the prophecies that there will be no debt, no lack, no hunger, no wars, no suffering in this world. Welcome to FESIG, the Free Energy Special Interest Group, where science meets spirituality in the quest for truth and knowledge to free humanity and transform this planet into a paradise.
Okay, thank you. That's it. That's what he produced. Could you hear the audio just now?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. So first, there being no other business, the meeting is now adjourned to the 17th of May, the 35th FESIG meeting with Adrian Espinosa. Thank you very much. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, Crystal. And
Thank
thank you,
you.
everybody.
Not
Thank you.
Adrian.
Bye.
Yeah, Mike's done.
Okay.